Good morning. My name is Cynthia Wright. Thank you for joining me for this session today. I am the Principal Cybersecurity Engineer for the MITRE Corporation, which does complex problem solving mostly in the scientific and technical realms for the federal government, and the CEO of Synthesis, which focuses on design thinking solutions for corporate and government innovation. So this webinar is about managing cyber risk for companies and organizations. It's targeted at senior executives and managers, not necessarily techies, so we're going to stay at that high strategic level throughout. I've got a couple of points throughout, in fact, a lot of them, throughout the webinar, in which, if I could see you all, I would be asking you direct questions. If you've got access to your keyboard, please feel free to respond over in the question category as I ask you those questions. And if you have other questions for me as the presentation goes along, also please feel free to type those into that bar, and I will address them as I can. All right, so I'm going to start this with a joke, and I'm going to assume that you all are laughing uproariously when it's over, because that's the appropriate reaction. Why didn't Walmart get hacked? We've heard lots of hacking stories for big corporate giants in the last few years. Why didn't Walmart get hacked? Because it wasn't a target. This is the point in which you all are laughing quietly to yourselves. But seriously, although that is a joke, it's become a truism in the cybersecurity circles that there are two kinds of companies, and I'm sure most of you who are on this webinar today have heard that. Those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. So if you think that you're going to be one of those two categories, why do anything about it? Why try and address your cyber risk if compromise is inevitable? That's because several cybersecurity experts around the world have published and discussed the fact that the best defense for cybersecurity is to limit your risk. You are not going to catch everyone who gets into your system. The best option is to narrow that aperture. And what kind of things are we talking about when we talk about cyber risk? There are dozens, literally dozens of ways in which cyber incidents, not all of them attacks, but many of them attacks, can affect your business or organization. Ransomware is increasingly in the news, as are the ransomware-related attacks that are undermining industrial control systems, maybe for ransom and maybe just for sheer destruction or extortion of other kinds. There's operational disruptions that can happen from physical risks, from floods or hurricanes or whatever. But in addition to the loss of data, which most insurance companies will cover for your company, there's other things that you put at risk in cyberspace when you don't take care of your cybersecurity risk. Your company's reputation, your organization's reputation, mission failure, your brand's damage to your brand, the release of private information, like through doxing that's happened to a bunch of different companies. So there's lots of areas of cyber risk. Companies that try and address all of those things individually are just going to find themselves trying to herd cats. It's not feasible to try and address each possible component of cyber risk, which is why we try to focus on reducing your company or organization's risk at the at the organic level. Biggest cybersecurity risk in any organization, I think we all know this intuitively, if not statistically, is humans. Whether it's your users, your well-intentioned but very busy staff, or some kind of a malicious insider or outsider. Humans are responsible for, or at least implicated in, 95% of cyber incidents, whether that's error or malicious intent or just failure to follow procedure. As one example, which I'm sure everyone in this session can identify with, if you can read that, it says, "I drink because your password is password." That's sadly a true statement. It's not password, then password 1234, or password 3421, or password with a capital P and an @ sign to the A, whatever it is, right? Lousy password security is a fundamental aspect of most organizations' cyber vulnerabilities. A lot of companies are able to address that through controls on their access management, but they run the risk then of people trying to subvert those with sticky notes under their keyboard or using some kind of common data, such as personal data that has perhaps already been compromised in a different breach elsewhere. So taking care of your personnel security risks is one of the biggest ways to start. But it's also true that risk happens. Risk isn't something that any company or organization wants or needs to eliminate completely. Risk is something that's important to business success. It's something that we seek to manage and not eliminate. Great business leaders know that they need to mitigate the risks that they can and accept the ones that they have to in order to reap the rewards of the opportunities in their business space. So how do we address cyber risk? Well, for companies that are trying to address their risk overall, their enterprise risk management, cybersecurity risk can be, it can seem technical, it can seem down in the weeds, it can seem like something that can endlessly suck money out of your organization and company. And so there tends to be a certain reluctance to engage in that. But from your customer's view or your business partner's view or your investor's view, cybersecurity is a key component of risk. So if we all recognize that cybersecurity risks are ubiquitous and growing in severity, why aren't companies making more progress on cybersecurity? While many organizations are improving some aspects of their enterprise security, a lot of companies still feel, a lot of organizations still feel that cybersecurity risk is something they it's either not feasible for them to address, or it's too complicated, or they don't need to because it's a huge internet and they're a little company, and hopefully they will just get lost in the noise. But in fact, that can be a pretty self-defeating mentality, and more self-defeating as time goes on. Right now, a lot of senior management don't feel like there's a business case for improving their cybersecurity strategy, but in fact, there are increasing legal penalties for failing to do so. And it's getting to the point in some states where not only can the company be held liable for cybersecurity breaches that affect their customers or investors, but individual C-suite and board members can be held liable for failing to do their due diligence on cybersecurity. In New York, one of the New York Financial Services new regulation requires CEOs and senior officers to actually sign off on a due diligence report of the cybersecurity of their organization if they have a great deal of customer or investor skin in the game for their organization. And this is becoming more of a trend in other states around the country. So not only is it just organizationally, operationally a good idea to address cybersecurity, but it's becoming increasingly a matter of self-preservation as well. Now let's just face it, nobody wants to face this. Oh, no, that's an angry bird. I meant an angry board. Nobody wants to be looking at their angry board members the day after a significant cyber breach that could have been averted. So some companies have taken this approach. They've kept this down in the IT section and said, I don't know what you guys do down there, but whatever it is, you need to make sure that we don't have any cybersecurity issues. And when this isn't working, and I'll tell you it never works, then you need to find another approach to addressing your cybersecurity risk. But where do you start? we looked at that initial Wordle that had dozens of aspects of cybersecurity risk. These three pictures, pick the one that most horrifies you, most resonates as a problem, makes you want to run screaming away. That's what cybersecurity looks like to many companies and organizations. But the answer to where you start is wherever you are. There is always something that's already in your organizational processes and your organizational culture that provides a handle for how to get a grip on your cybersecurity risk, because you're already addressing risks and investment priorities and opportunities and threats in other aspects of your business. Almost invariably, those processes offer you a way to deal with your cybersecurity risk as well. So the good news is, those are very happy people there on the right, cyber risk is manageable. Not eliminatable, but manageable when the organization's fundamentals are strong. This gets back to the idea that you have the elements in your organization today to start building cybersecurity. Leadership commitment, knowing what you want to do and who's responsible for doing it, being aware of the risks that are relevant to your sector or your type of organization or company, making sure that all the stakeholders that have any aspect of cyber in their mission set are involved in your decision making and understand the approach, understand your prioritization, and that cybersecurity is consistently resourced. It's not something you can throw money at one time and solve your problem indefinitely. And then also when cybersecurity programs are aligned with your normal business needs and processes. So you don't need an entire new process for budgeting for your cybersecurity or for deciding what systems to purchase or for anything like that. Leverage the processes that are already working for you because cyber is inextricably linked to all of your normal business functions. So just working it in as an additional aspect of what you already do is usually the most manageable approach for most companies. And finally, those senior leaders can just follow a few simple rules. How many simple rules, you ask? No, it's not really that bad. It's not 42. That is the answer to life, the universe, and everything, as most of you know if you're any kind of geeks. 9 rules are what we're going to talk about today. I was going to make it 10, but if I put a 1 and a 0 on a screen with people who are used to talking tech, they think it means 2. And I don't want to confuse the binary guys. So we pared it down to 9. First one is pay now or pay later. Cybersecurity is whether your organization has really embraced this idea or not, cybersecurity is a core aspect of your mission and business, whether it's how your suppliers interact with you, how you do your billing, how you manage your personnel, whether your product itself is technology-oriented. Cyber is part of your business model. So you either pay for security now or you pay for breach cleanup later. And the earlier cyber dependencies are identified, the easier it is to address them and the less expensive it is to address them. All right, I'm getting into a couple of audience feedback areas here. Does anybody know who this is? This is Cylon number 6 from the new Battlestar Galactica. She's a cyborg. That is what cybersecurity looks like when it is built in. It's sleek, it's gorgeous. Everybody wants their cybersecurity to look like this. This is what cybersecurity looks like when it's bolted on. Now, which one of these two models do you want your cybersecurity to look like in your business model from the outside? So focusing on cybersecurity as you're starting a new, any kind of new initiative rather than paying for a new system, a new business system or something, and then trying to figure out how to secure it is always going to get you a more effective, more elegant solution. Number 2, know what you've got. You can't protect what you don't know you have. Off to the right, those are just various types of inventories from my son's gaming and from just warehouses. So that includes a wide variety of categories. Physical assets, meaning your actual computers. Do you know when a laptop gets lost or stolen your software? Do you know what you're running, especially in some of the darker corners of your business? Do you know what data is most valuable to your business, and what processes depend on accurate data that you may be storing somewhere, or that you may be bringing in from outside sources? And then finally, your accounts. Do you know that all of those are valuable? Not valuable, viable and valid. Do you know that the people who are on your system belong on your system? There's a word out there called shadow IT. I want you to be aware of shadow IT. Shadow IT is those systems, and it often happens in older companies, bigger companies, where you have a wide variety of legacy systems that are out running things that you don't think of necessarily as core to your business, but that do provide access into key aspects. For instance, during the Target hack, we know that Target was compromised through their heating and air conditioning vendor because of the way their billing systems were connected. So that's something that can be an example of shadow IT. Or if you may have an older, say, accounting system or something that you perhaps adopted before cybersecurity measures were common, that may be something that you want to go back and look at. Make sure that you don't have any of that shadow IT, and if you do, that you have done what you can to secure that. All right, number 3, think like the bad guy. This is fundamental to cybersecurity. It's normal for business leaders and senior managers to look at their business from their own perspective. You think about the product that you sell to your customers or the services that you provide, and you focus on those things as being what's of value to your business. But a bad guy doesn't necessarily look at your business that way or your organization that way. They're looking for kind of the soft underbelly of your business. And so they may see things that are valuable in your organization that you're not aware of. And a really good example is some of these health services cyber compromises that have happened. It's not that the bad guys are trying to get at your medical records per se. They don't care that much, whether you got your flu shot. What they care about is that your medical records include your Social Security number, your date of birth, your family members, your address, all those other pieces of data that are valuable that are just instrumental for you, that are very valuable for someone seeking to move into other compromised areas. My background is military, and I usually try not to quote fighter pilots because you just don't need to add to the ego. But this is a fighter pilot quote. 90% of situational awareness is just knowing what's going on around you. This guy does not know what's going on around him. All right. Number 4, number 4 is an extension of knowing what's going on around you. There is an increasing tendency for cyber attacks. We have a mental picture of the guy in his mom's basement in the sweatshirt and the pizza and Monster drinks next to him, plugging away at his computer trying to get to your data. And that feeds the idea that cyberspace is really big and your company is really small and they're never going to find you. But the increase in automated attacks is the reason why someone is going to find you. They are going to find your business because they can hit millions, literally millions of businesses at the same time. In that context, you're no longer invisible. So a lot of automated attacks are very brief. The point of time at which they show up on your particular system is timing. You're not going to find that attack after the fact. So being prepared to detect it when it's ongoing is really important to understanding what's happening, really important to your situational awareness for your risk management. Again, you can't protect everything. There's a well-known saying that says the bad guys only have to be right all the time. Bad guys only have to be right once, and that's true. But you can look at the areas that can do the most damage. the areas where you have the greatest collective vulnerability, for instance, your customer accounts or your mission systems or your industrial control systems. A couple of basics like having intrusion prevention systems and detection systems. Do some scanning. Know what's normal. Know what's not normal. You should always be running licensed software. And if you're running licensed software, they'll help you by patching that software if it's a good, reliable company. But if your company is not investing in the staffing and the processes to do that patch management, you may as well not even be receiving those patches. Patch management is absolutely essential. A lot of automated attacks these days are designed to infect backup systems as well. So keeping your backup systems completely separated, making sure that you have known good backups before you do that backup is really important. And then just practicing your response time and processes. That will improve your situational awareness because you will get into a better rhythm of knowing what's normal, what's not normal, and so forth. All right, so number 4, keep it simple, stupid. I think we all know that acronym. This is a good memory jogger for you. A security architecture that's incredibly difficult is really hard to defend. It just creates too many gaps and seams. The CTO of Microsoft at last year's RSA conference said that as a general rule, they would recommend that companies try and stay with fewer than 3 versions of a particular system and with fewer than 3 families of systems. So, for instance, you may be running one family of database systems, one family of servers, one family of intrusion detection, whatever. And that's fine, but try to keep the different generations of those systems under control and try to keep the number of types of systems that you're running under control. Mostly because when you try and mix and match those families, you're really kind of MacGyvering those things together, and you're creating opportunities for a dedicated cyber attacker to find a way in. One reason that this is really important for C-suite leaders and senior managers is that there's a real tendency to hope that the guy who just came in and said, we have this widget that's going to solve all your problems on a cybersecurity front, you just plug it in and it's going to protect your network. Trust me. That he knows what he's talking about and that's true. But you're going to get another one of those guys next week and another guy the week after that. And each time they're going to be telling you, oh, but there's this new threat. And our system and only our system is addressing that new threat. And so there's a tendency for these great one-time I'm going to fix it for everything solutions to proliferate in your enterprise until you have a half a dozen of these things, all of which you think are taking care of a certain piece of your security, but in the conglomerate are adding to your staffing issues, their ability to patch and manage those systems, the complexity of what they have to do whenever there's a configuration change. So try and keep your architecture simple. This is and number 5 is sort of related to that. Beware of hidden costs. When you buy some of these new amazing technologies, and they're not necessarily cybersecurity technologies, they can just be business systems or something related to how your company or organization functions in cyberspace. Just not saying don't do that, just saying be aware when you invest in these new technologies that there's more to those costs than what you pay for upfront on the invoice. You're adding to that operational complexity that we just talked about on the last slide. There are licensing and sustainment costs that extend essentially into perpetuity and that accumulate over time as you add to these systems. Workforce training costs, additional costs for analyzing new and different types of logs if this is a system that you need to pay particular attention to, troubleshooting, patching, and all of those things, as complicated as they are 100 times more complicated in the midst of a breach. Trying to manage those functions while you're trying to put out a fire is exponentially more complicated. Number 6, when you're looking for cybersecurity solutions, you have to, unfortunately, account for the humans. We've all seen these these types of intentional security devices in our lives meant to keep you safe that people subvert because it's inconvenient. So trying to make your security processes as convenient as possible is super desirable. Everybody hates the password complexity rules, right? 27 characters, 3 of them in Arabic, and 1, I don't know, number and blood of a virgin thing. And by the way, you have to change it again next week. So NIST has come out with a new guideline that says if your system will support it, it's much better to have passphrases that you never change, but that are very long, and not like a line of text, not something that you could search online, but a phrase that's meaningful to you, that's quite long, that you never have to change, that in the long run is going to be more secure than these random passwords that all of us change by 1 character or 1 number or stick on a sticky note or just ignore. So trying to take human nature into account when you're developing security processes is important, because remember, 95% of our cybersecurity incidents have a human in the loop. Number 7, bad news isn't wine. Colin Powell is a personal hero of mine, and I particularly like this saying of his. It was meant with regard to military operations to say that it's not going to get better if I don't know about it. I need my staff, my officers, to bring bad news to me as soon as possible. And C-suites and corporate leaders need to have that same approach. There needs to be a culture of encouragement for reporting bad news on the cybersecurity front, because the earlier you can detect a cybersecurity incident, the sooner you can control that damage, and hopefully the more you can limit its spread. So not just encouraging communication, but rewarding the messenger. If your CIO or your IT guy comes and says, I think we've got a breach, the best solution is not to fire the guy on the spot. It's to enlist them in their expertise. They found this, after all, and help you get this back under control. Number 8, I'm hoping that there's some folks out there who recognize this illusion. I could typically rely on a good number of geeks in the audience who, of one sort or another, will get it. Yes, it is House Stark from Game of Thrones. And what this is talking about is community. There's been a lot of research lately, publicized research lately, on how having a community, having a social network helps people stay healthier, live longer lives, all those kinds of good things. The same can be said about corporations and cybersecurity. The health of your cybersecurity ecosystem is improved by having partnerships. And there's a whole bunch of ways that you can partner with other organizations. And this applies to small companies as well as large companies. In some cases, it can apply more to small companies, because small companies don't always have the internal resources to have a large or sophisticated IT staff. But with some careful planning and budgeting, they often can partner with somebody who does, whether that's an information or threat sharing network like the ISACs or ISAOs that are good for the industrial sectors for threat sharing, whether it's partnering with someone to do incident response when you have a serious breach, like if you don't have a sophisticated enough staff to do incident response, partnering with one of the Mandiants or Symantec's, or even a local firm may help you with that. Investigations and forensics, of course, you can always partner with law enforcement. Lots of companies are reluctant to bring the FBI in a breach, but it's a good idea. For the most part, there's a fear that the FBI is gonna muck around in areas that you don't want them to. But for the most part, speaking as someone who's worked a great deal with government, that isn't the case. If they find felonies in your network like kitty porn, yes, you've got a problem. But you had a problem anyway, you just didn't know about it. So don't be afraid to engage law enforcement. They have the tools, they have the expertise, they have the motivation to help you solve your problem. and they can, in some cases, help make sure that that you can watch for further incursions afterwards, and they can help alert other companies that might look like you. Public-private R&D ventures, like partnering with a university. A lot of universities have cybersecurity research programs. If your company has an affiliation with a university or a lab or something like that, that may be someone that you can profitably partner with for cybersecurity. And then finally, risk transfer. Cybersecurity insurance is a little bit of a complicated topic. It's increasingly available. More and more providers are offering it. I don't have an opinion on it one way or the other, except to say read the fine print. And because it's so new, there may be room to really tailor a cybersecurity insurance package to your needs. One positive role that cybersecurity insurers are potentially bringing to the market is they're seeking some standards. They're trying to figure out what is the equivalent of the seatbelt and fire suppression systems in other areas of insurance. What is it that companies could do in the cybersecurity area that would dramatically decrease their risk? And because of the way insurance processes their actuarial data, when they finally get enough of that data to figure out those standards, if that happens, then that will be a significant value to all companies and organizations to kind of know what the bare minimum is, what really works and what doesn't work. For now, I would say, look at what you're buying. If you're going to go for cybersecurity insurance, a lot of it covers just the identity theft aspect, and doesn't necessarily cover things like intellectual property loss or losses due to mission interruption. If you have a breach that shuts you down for a certain period of time, almost none cover brand reputational damage, anything that might be compensation for that. So just look at what you're buying, look at what you need, and just recognize that if you partner with a cyber insurer, it can be useful, but it's probably not going to totally protect you in the ways that some other kinds of insurance, more mature areas of the insurance industry can do. All right, and finally, we're zeroing in on number 9. Cybersecurity is a lifestyle change. Unfortunately, it is a lot like exercise. Nobody wants to hear that diet and exercise is the answer, but sadly, diet and exercise is always the answer. And that's the same case with cybersecurity. Now, not everyone is up for quite such rigorous exercise as this, but it doesn't have to be that way. Really, cybersecurity can just be everybody going out for a jog. If you can approach cybersecurity from that level, getting all your stakeholders involved, getting them all headed in the same direction, it doesn't have to be a sprint, and it doesn't have to be an acrobatic endeavor. It can be something that you build into your culture and decrease your risk that way. All right, so some of the takeaways from this discussion. This is sort of something that is a thread that's gone throughout, but I didn't call it out as a specific rule. Hopefully this is something your company is doing anyway. Relentless communication is incredibly helpful in almost any aspect, but certainly in risk management. Knowing what's happening in all the areas of your organization, making sure people are comfortable and encouraged to communicate with you about things that they're seeing, concerns that they have, security issues, even if what they're complaining about is that your security measures are painful and they hate them, then that's an important data point, because that lets you know that probably people are subverting those security measures because they're just too inconvenient. So having that relentless communication is sort of a foundation stone of good risk management in any area. What I mean by institutionalizing cyber risk management means making it not something that you address once a year, or even worse, not something that you address once and then readdress 3 or 4 years later when it's time to update your strategic plan. Cyber risk management is something that should be as much a part of your normal institutional processes as everything else. Budget reviews, programmatic reviews, milestones, any process that you already have built into your company, institutionalized in your organization, is an area where you can also incorporate cyber risk management and should incorporate cyber risk management. The more cyber risk management is integrated into your normal processes, the more successful you're going to be in managing those risks on a constant level. Simplify where you can. That gets back to that not buying every widget, making sure that you keep your architecture as simple as possible so that your IT team can manage it. Track your progress. That can be difficult in cybersecurity because, of course, you're hoping not to have any breaches, for instance, that you're tracking. But you need to find metrics that are useful and meaningful for your company. One that tends to be effective is patch management, things related to patch management. Are you able to patch the systems you have within a reasonable time frame? Most patches, in the world, statistically, most patches or most system vulnerabilities go unpatched, even when there's a patch available, for more than 3 months, sometimes more than 2 years. That's crazy, and you are going to have a breach. Patch management should be something that can occur regularly. If you don't have the manpower to do it consistently, then perhaps either the architecture is too complex or your IT sustainment staff isn't big enough. So those are areas that you can track your progress and try and make improvements. And keeping those systems patched is just a huge risk reducer for any kind of organization. This one is slow. Hesitating to tap it again, but I'm going to. Okay, maybe I didn't tap it hard enough. Partner up. We talked about that a second ago with House Dark. Find some allies, find some partners, find people who can fill your gaps. You don't necessarily have to hire your own staff to take care of all your cyber risk management needs. There is somebody out there who is doing that. If what you do is tech, if what you do is all proprietary data, that may be worth doing in-house. If it's not, if you're providing goods or services and cyber is not your main business, then you really may want to look at partnering up with somebody whose business it is. Exercise your incident response. Run a few drills. Sometimes if you're not familiar with doing those kinds of operational drills within your own company, you can hire a consultant for not too often much to just help you get through that once, help you establish those kinds of checklists and processes. One of the biggest things a lot of companies don't have is just a who to call when list. Just the kind of checklist that says, if I see this, who do I call, and then who does she call, and then who do they call? And what are their responsibilities when they get that call? Just working through those kinds of scenarios in a tabletop exercise, take half a day, work through a scenario, can really provide dividends when you have an actual cyber incident. Can really drastically improve your response time and effectiveness. And then this sounds kind of alarming, and it's not something we address as a cyber risk management rule, but it's a good idea. This is another something that came out of the RSA conference a couple of years ago. Most states have some kind of breach legislation, either on the books or pending. And a lot of that breach legislation is stopwatch-based. Your responsibilities to your shareholders, your liability, or whatever, are affiliated with the time at which you detected the breach or decided that you had a breach. And so bringing your general counsel in early to your discussions, like immediately when you think that you have a breach going on, can be really valuable because they can help you figure out at what point you need to make a decision, take certain actions, do those kinds of things to protect yourself and your organization from liability. Because the reality is, many companies are, even companies who do everything right, companies who manage their risks at, at a good level, at a level that's appropriate to their risk environment and to their resourcing context, are still going to have something go wrong. So just building that into your processes is a good idea. And then finally, this is the number one takeaway for C-suite leaders. Cyber risk isn't something that the IT shop manages. Cyber risk is an IT risk. Cyber risk is risk to your business, to your mission, to your customers, to your brand. And making your senior leadership, your board, your investors understand that investments in cybersecurity are investments in the success of your business is fundamental to getting the kinds of organizational fundamentals in place that will help you manage cybersecurity risk for the long term. So I'm going to open this up for questions here in a second. So if you have a question, please just type it in on the bar on your screen. I have one question on whether the slides will be made available. I believe they will be made available on the BrightTALK website. Are there any other questions that I can answer for the audience? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to throw this up while you think about it for a couple more minutes. This is my slide that's meant to provoke pretty much everyone in any audience. Someone will be offended by something in there, one way or another. All right. Hopefully, I am leaving you with a chuckle and also with some good tips that you can take back for improving your. Oh, wait. We have a couple questions. One is, if you partner up, would you recommend establishing NDAs or some other means of protecting IP, reputation, et cetera? Yes, I would definitely. I guess this depends partly on your business. But if your business involves intellectual property or something like that, or processes or brand development that you are concerned a cyber security company could somehow compete with or create concerns about, then yeah, absolutely do establish NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to protect yourself. But also for most companies, if you're, the guys who are going to help you in a cybersecurity incident aren't doing what you do, or you wouldn't be going to them. So as long as you're working with a reputable company, some of the big names with good reputations, you're not really going to have too much to worry about in that area. If you're hiring, your sister's son because he's super smart, you might want to consider a little bit of legal coverage. But for the most part, I think that's just be aware when you partner up. When you work with an ISAC or an ISAL, those organizations, the sector information sharing organizations, those already have those kinds of protections put in place. So at the very least, reach out to them for information sharing and threat sharing. Any other questions? All right, well, I'll still be here on the line for a few more minutes if anyone has any further questions that I can answer. Thank you for joining me today for today's session. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. So I just got a question on, do I have a privacy slide deck? and would we be willing to address your organization in late October, I would, there's an email address. I will be happy to get in contact with you and we can discuss it. Thanks.